As far as religion, that's another story. You could go another long route there trying to figure that one out.
San Luis up here, which you mentioned, which is the oldest town in Colorado, is very lightly populated, even now. Why do you think that is? Is it simply because of the drought and certain climatic changes over the last century?
You have an abundance of ranching and farming all the way up this path here, and the water comes from a reservoir on the other side of that mesa. It's a good-sized reservoir. It's called Sanchez Reservoir. So they've got the water for agriculture here. The fact that it's so densely populated is probably because ever since, people don't want change here. They're happy with their simple lives. People would rather live peaceful, quiet, serene type life than to have the hustle bustle. There's not even a street light in that town. I mean, you've got stop signs and that's it. They have recently beautified it a little bit just to help, you know, the attraction of of the people that go by. You know, travelers will stop and look. You know,
but they really don't want people migrating here.
They don't like outsiders, which is one thing about this area. You've got a lot of population on the mesa where they've started to settle there. You know, that's a little distance away, but they're slowly coming into the picture as far as politics involved here and business, which is very small businesses.
And when you say politics, for those that don't know, there's a few people that own a lot here that are wealthy, that have been around a long time, that have weight.
There's a few here that mostly will stay involved politically, and then they have their ranches and their farming that they rely on once they get out of their terms. You know what I mean? But other people have their chance, but it's terms, and then you have the same people trying to get right back in.
So you think it's going to be like that for a while? That this reality, this place?
Well, there's no change here. There's no
They'll
change.
look like this for some time.
You know, you're not going to see McDonald's and you're not going to see Walmart here for another 100 years, if even so. You know what I mean? It's just not wanted here. Not wanted.
Keep it in Alamosa.
Alamosa has grown a little bit. They've got their Walmarts, they got their parts stores, they got their dealerships, auto dealerships. So they've grown a little, but it's also a small community. It's not a big city, and it's a simple town too. You know, there's no industry. You know, there's agriculture, and then you've got the Adams State College that they thrive a little bit on. Your migration came on this side of the Rio Grande, which is about 18 miles to our west, and then the other migration stayed on that side of the Rio Grande. So you've got the same cultures, and you have the same background as far as bloodlines that are coming up on both sides of it. It's all from the south. Starting in Mexico, they came into New Mexico and then came up into Colorado. They were trying to get all the way up to probably Wyoming, and at some point in time it stopped. You know what I mean? The government just put a stop to it, and it never became Mexico. So we are everyone is the same bloodline from the south on both sides. And you'll notice if you go into New Mexico, either side, that the west side you're going into Albuquerque, the south side you're going into the Indian reservation in Taos, and people are basically the same people. You know, they've got the same feelings, thoughts, beliefs. You know, you can be an outsider and come in here. You know, you're minding your own business, and people are nice. They'll even invite you in and give you a nice warm dinner. You know, if you're hungry, but they don't want groups coming in here that are going to try and get any kind of power in any way that is going to upset what all of their children have been taught all this time. See, so there's a limit to everything that you can do here. But like I say, they're nice to outsiders. They just don't want them involved in their business. See, because here you have an awful lot of artists. This is very rich in art. I've got a friend that is a master weaver, master cabinet maker. He's a jeweler. He's a builder. he taught it in school. There's very, very intelligent people in this area. You've got carvers that can turn a tree stump into a couple of cubs and a mama bear, you know. You've got, you know, painters. We've got a painter that lived in this house right here. She now resides in Denver and has her own studio and teaches art. Very, very, very good artist. Oil paintings. So it's rich in art here.
Yeah, it might have something to do with the energy. I heard Salaida's called the gateway.
Okay.
Another name for it.
And
then Creststone, I've heard a little bit about that.
Creststone is at the base of Mount Blanca. On the northwest side.
And some of those parts of the San Luis Valley have been a little bit more, I guess one could say, infiltrated or now inhabited by outsiders. There's a lot of outside interest that's come into those particular places from the artist community elsewhere, right? Okay.
Right. Now you also have the sand dunes right there at the base of that Mount Blanca. So that's another attraction here. I mean, it's one of the 7 wonders, you know. So, and it sits right on the main highway, easy access. Have a lot of travelers that stop and look at that thing.
Now, you live pretty simply without power and heat over here?
Right now, I'm running on limited power.
Right.
I'm awaiting the grid.
The very basics.
The grid line coming in. You know, we've been waiting to finally get that in because I tried a alternative power solar and it just didn't work out for me. I was kind of neglected as far as the company goes, and so now we're going to go into the company with the wire grid. But we'll run on basic generator power and live comfortable for now. You know, it's not a hard life if you know how to live it. Survival is the main key, you know what I mean? It's like stay warm, have your food, water. Those are your 3 basic things.
That's it.
And you're fine. Now, if you don't mind solitude, that's another thing about here. You live alone, you know. You're lucky to have a few visitors from time to time, you know, and you share a few thoughts, and that's about it. Very, very, very lonely life. A lot of people don't like it. They'll leave. They'll go to the big city and look for jobs there. All the convenience. You know. We have no convenience here. You know, slow internet type communications, and then you've got some landlines, but mostly people live on cell phones here. It's just a lot easier, you know what I mean? Which is a little step up at least. But farmers and ranchers here, they're not that poor, you know what I mean? They've got their good vehicles, and they've got their equipment, and they've got their farms to work, and they live.
They've got what they need to survive, to live. Yeah.
They live happy. You know, having water, they can make it work.
Water without fluoride. You're right. Mineral water comes runoff from the mountains, right?
There's a community water line that runs up to here. This is the end of the community water line right here, and they've had a problem with it for many years. I've got my own well water, and if you taste the well water here, you will taste absolutely nothing but clear water. That's all it is. Clean water. And you can have it tested, and they'll guarantee that you can bottle it and sell it. That's how good the water is here. And it's ground level too. Our table is right below this ground right here. All you have to do is dig for a set of posts there, and you'll hit wet sand.
I know there's limited fertile soil here, especially over there where I'm staying by the Rio Grande ranches. But if someone wanted to grow a few things, how would you recommend they do it? And how soon from now? And what kind of vegetables?
Well, this soil here has already been used in vegetation for produce at one time. And we're talking about maybe 50,
this has been depleted.
Yes, 50 years ago, this was good soil. And you had agriculture all along in here, and on the top of the desert up there, they had water. It was decent.
Was this corn
soil.
from the last year's?
This is last year's, yeah. He came in and he put in some corn and some habas and some grazeland, a little bit of grass mixed here. But the soil will work, but you have to fertilize it. Now, a lot of the cow manure is what they're using here. you have cattle here, so might as well use the manure and put it back in the ground and grow the next year. But of course you got to change your different growth. Is 1 year grass, another year you could put alfalfa, and then grow that of 3 years maybe, and then take it out and then put some corn or something, and that helps that soil. See, you don't want to deplete it to the point where not even alfalfa will grow. So they change their fields, you know, from time to time. They'll bring in ammonia as a fertilizer, and they use the same manure where the cows graze. That's about it. They don't use much more as far as fertilizers around here. They don't believe in fertilizers. You know, most of your cattle here are the homegrown meat, you know what I mean?
So even if it's not quote-unquote organic, it still is much more natural than what a lot of people are already eating. Okay.
Now there's no hormones involved in all this. Of course they give them their inoculations so that they don't get sick. You won't see sick cows going into the auctions from here, you know. These people are pretty proud people. They like what they have, and they're proud of it. They'll show it, you know what I mean? There, you know, how do you prove, you know, how do you prove a myth? How do you prove, you know, these sightings? How do you prove mutilations? You know, unless you have physical proof or actual, you know, visual proof for yourself, at least to believe and be able to pass that on. But I don't know of anybody that has any proof. So these are just appearances in the sky, and then they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say this is just used as a pathway somewhere else, and not really, you know, a landing spot to
pathway, like in connecting a series of
maybe so
underground landing areas.
Yeah, I've heard there's some other places, but I don't know of any place here that they would be using, because nobody's seen them.
Right.
So it's basically just go through, and you know, like I say, I'd say a wormhole in this pathway. You know what I mean? Because once they disappear, where do they go? But as far as underground, nobody's found any such thing. You know what I mean? Now Indians believe that there's pathways through their mountains here in Arizona, but you know, they're considered sacred, so nobody will upset them. See?